Members of the Audit Committee, we're going to start. I bid you a good morning and welcome. This is the first meeting of a new committee in the sense that the Audit Committee and the Standards Committee have been brought together. And I'd like to welcome amongst our membership Simon Openshaw, who was the chair of the Standards Committee, and going forward, one of the, if as necessary, there will be meetings of a subcommittee of this committee, which will be dealing with standards, and Simon will take that forward. Now, we've got quite a heavy agenda, so I'm going to take as read that people have had the opportunity to read the terms of reference of this committee. And I'm going to move to apologies for absence. And I've just started that as Andrea, who's giving us the information on apologies, is otherwise engaged.
Full house, Chair.
Sorry?
Full house. No
We have a full house, right. So the next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 27th of March. Now, most members of this committee will not have been at that meeting. Councillor Dale, who's now the vice chair of this committee, was there. So I'm not going to go through the minutes page by page. I'm just going to ask if there's any comment from members who were present. Councillor Dale?
Can I just move acceptance of the minutes, please?
Right. Do I need a seconder? So I need a seconder for that. Councillor Swinburne, thank you for that. Right. Due process duly observed. The minutes of the 27th of March are written into the record. Now, item number 4 is disclosure of members' interests, and Stephen Gerrard is here to help if there are any queries or questions. But are there any disclosure of members' interests that need to be brought to the attention of the committee? Nope. Good. Now we move to the substantive items on the agenda. And with your agreement, committee, I'm going to suggest that we move to agenda item 7 on our agenda. And that is the draft annual governance statement covering the years 24-25. And the purpose of this report is to enable us as the Audit and Standards Committee to review it and consider whether it properly reflects the risk environment, the governance that the Council is operating under. Now, I'm going to ask the leader of the Council, Councillor Sanderson, to say a few words to introduce this annual governance statement to us. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee as well for agreeing to let me go first. The Audit Committee last saw this report in March. There have been two relatively significant changes. The first one is it now includes an auditor opinion. And secondly, it also refers to the Advanced Northumberland restructure paper that we took in March, and the details of which I think members will be aware. Apart from that, it's virtually the same, although a little shorter. The paper, Chairman, acknowledges the successes that we've had over the last 12 months and beyond in terms of really significant actions for the Council, and they would include a big plaudit to our staff right across the council for delivering the services that we have wanted to see delivered, not least, of course, in terms of external inspections, such as the business skills service, which was rated good, the adult service was rated good, and the children's services were rated outstanding. In addition to that, we have also seen the significant investment in new schools continue. The great success of the Northumberland line, and yesterday we celebrated the 500,000th customer journey in just 7 and a bit months, which is extraordinary. And we look forward to seeing the other stations opening soon. And also the £10 billion data centre campus investment, which will bring many, many jobs. And as a result of the negotiation that took place, a new fund of £110 million, which will create thousands of jobs right across the county in the years to come. And also, I'm very proud of the work that we're doing with our BEST programme, which for new members is basically around making sure that we are very clear about the need for efficiency and the best possible service at the least cost. And that is what we are concentrating on, what we have done and what we will continue to do. If I could turn members to page 73, just 2 quick points there. The auditor's report praised the great strides the council has made since review of governance. And of course, the LGA corporate peer review, which you'll remember not long ago, noted many great improvements, including that in governance. So that is very much something that we can all be proud of, those members that were there when that happened. And then if I could turn finally to page 81, and this is around our plans for improving governance, which you would expect me to be challenged on if you have any queries about how we're going to move forward even more. You'll see that on the second one, the trust and openness, I'm immensely grateful to all the group leaders in the previous administration for working together in the way we have. I hope very much we might see the same thing, the same air of trust and mutual respect continue. I certainly will do everything I can to make sure that happens. And I hope very much we can see the success we made in the last administration continue to move forward for the benefit of the council and the benefit of our residents. On the second one, the full programme of policy conferences were completed, and you will know that we have introduced a new format of member forums, and the first took place yesterday with Councillor Oliver around the first stages of thinking about our budget for next year. I know it seems extraordinary that we should start looking at a budget that we won't look at in detail for a number of months so quickly, but it's important that members feel involved and members have an input into the budget, just the same as our residents will have. And the second one, on the partially complete, the member development one is developing. I think the feedback I've had from member induction was good, and we will continue to find the relevant and appropriate training that members want to have going forward. And I'm pleased to say that actually on the 1st of September, the LGA have asked us to host an all new member conference, and which will run till 2 sessions on September the 1st, and I will welcome the delegates to the first one and hopefully the second one as well. I'm very pleased to be welcoming many new members from right across the political spectrum into County Hall, and that will be a stepping stone, I think, for more work with other authorities as we go forward with our member training programme. So with that, Chairman and members, thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. Now, members, the Audit Committee doesn't own the annual governance statement. That's the responsibility of the Council's officers. But we have an oversight role, and so the questions that we might ask are, is it accurate? Does it reflect the Council's governance reality? Is it complete? So those are the sorts of questions that we could be asking. So I'm going to open it up for questions from the committee. Councillor Dale.
That's a start. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I just go through to very quickly on page 6, because I think I was just talking earlier on, we can review the annual government statement, continue to review it until time is correct, and then there's a line. But under the Constitution, you probably see the new Constitution document signed by full Council at its annual general meeting 20 May 23 and is reviewed and updated as needed. So maybe we need an update there, as the Constitution has been changed specifically for this Audit Committee as well. So I think that might be, you can add that in. The only other thing I would ask is about the assurances on the actual outcomes, say, for value for money, which I'm very keen on, is actually understanding the key performance indicators behind that. I don't think it's a subject now, but I think it's something that we should look at and be able to understand, and all members be able to understand how important it is for providing value for money, and it gives the assurance to the public that we are actually providing value to money, and that's what a lot of people want. So those are just two things I'd like to add. But also, I think, obviously, we can add in about having an election and changes, etc. But I think that will be added in the annual government statement at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. On the second point in particular, we are in the process of developing our new corporate plan for the next 3-4 years. That will involve members' input. I'll be taking a report to council on that, and this will be revolving around our 3 priorities, one of which, of course, the first one is value for money, in all the senses that we're talking about. And I would look forward to members' input on that and other things when we talk about this at council, but also when we talk about it again on the 31st of October, I think it is, which is when we're having our next member forum, which hopefully will feed in ideas from all members into that programme.
Okay. So I have a query. So the financial pressures that are impacting the council are referenced, and I just wonder whether there should be, and I'd be interested in the officers' views as well, a more in-depth analysis of financial resilience, sort of countering that. So that's one of my queries.
I agree, because it is one of probably the biggest challenges that we have now. Could I possibly ask Councillor if he wants to speak on this one, please?
Yeah, I mean, the financial challenges that the council faces are sort of well documented, obviously, in all of the outturn reports and in fact the statement of accounts, which we're about to discuss. I'm just wondering whether the governance statement is the right place to be sort of highlighting that, because it's highlighted in so many different other places. And I think the governance statement is about the sort of robustness of the frameworks that make sure that things like that, and indeed it's one of the corporate risks as well that we come on to later in the meeting. So my gut feel is that probably not the place to do that, but it is. But I would highlight that it is dealt with in lots of other places.
Yeah. I'm happy with that. As you say, there's a suite of documents which interact with each other. So, yeah, okay. Members, any further questions on the draft annual governance statement? Right. Okay. Thank you very much. So, Mrs. Willis, just remind me, what's the next? This comes back to us when it's been with the audits.
Yes, so the annual governance statement will be reviewed by external audit alongside the financial statements. If there are any further significant governance events or matters that need to be reflected, between now and the point at which that external audit is completed, there may need to be some further revisions, but the final version will come back to the committee when we get to the end of that external audit process.
Okay, thank you. So members, we're invited to ask questions and to note the draft annual governance statement, which we've done. That concludes that agenda item. Thank you very much, Leader of the Council. Right.
Can we just agree the recommendations?
Sorry?
Can we just agree the recommendations?
Right.
Please.
I've just been reminded that we need to agree the recommendations. I'm slightly thrown because we took this one in advance, so that's right. So what we're being invited to agree is that the Audit and Standards Committee agree the draft annual governance statement as shown. And we agree that. We don't need to take a vote on that, we just agree it. Yeah, thank you. Right, members, we now return to the agenda as printed on the order paper. So we're moving to agenda item 5, which is the first of a series of reports from Kevin MacDonald, who's our Head of Internal Audit and Risk Management. And this first document is on the effectiveness of the framework of governance, risk management and control for 2024-25. So it's looking back at the year that's just passed. So I'm going to ask, Kevin's on screen and he's going to introduce this agenda item.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And the title just trips off the tongue, but thank you for the report introduction. Yes, Chair, this report is my annual opinion to you as the Audit and Standards Committee for the year 2024 and 25. It's an opinion which I have to provide and is supposed to be timed to go alongside the annual governance statement, and indeed it was prepared and used as part of the draft annual governance statement, which we've just considered. So, Chair, the report, as you say, covers the framework of governance, risk management and control, and the document which starts on page 37 of the papers, which is the annual opinion appendix, basically goes through the background to my opinion for last year, which is one of reasonable overall. There is no set guidance on what an opinion should be, suitable, unsuitable, etc. There is no set terminology. And at the moment, we just use the 4 assurance level opinion levels that we provide, and we marry it against that. So reasonable is our second highest of 4 possible categories, and we've just given the same opinion level for last year. So although reasonable may not sound it, it is actually quite a positive opinion for the organisation. So the document just goes through in a little bit more detail each of the aspects of governance, risk management and control. And in terms of the reflecting on the governance improvements that were made during the previous year, some of which the leader has alluded to in the earlier agenda item. The risk management aspect, where we see the continued embedding of risk management across the organisation, and our now public reporting of corporate risks through Cabinet, which is something again that introduced by the leader a couple of years ago. Just another step in terms of that embedding of our corporate risk management arrangements throughout the organisation. And then from the controls aspect, mainly from the work of internal audit, but not just the work of internal audit. But then the report takes through all the sources of assurance, the work that we've done during the year to come to that opinion. A little bit around the quality assurance and improvement programme within the internal audit team. So you've got a team that is delivering to a good standard. There is then the summary of work undertaken throughout the year, so you can see the body of work upon which audit has based its opinion. And then, Chair, there is a there's a short summary in terms of the global internal audit standards. This is the first meeting of the committee since April 1st, when the new global internal audit standards came into being. And usually the annual opinion gives a bit of a flavour around the audit section's performance against those standards. So the summary just takes through, in hopefully not too granular a detail, an initial self-assessment that we had undertaken against those standards, and the couple of areas where we've identified some further action just to make sure we fully meet the updated standards. And we'll be bringing more reports on that throughout the year to you as the committee, so you can see that we're following through on those actions. Chair, I wouldn't propose to say anything further, but more than happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. So Kevin's given a reasonable assurance assessment in terms of the hierarchy of assessments, which means that there's no critical weaknesses in governance or controls that suggest a lack of oversight. But remembering that internal audit is selective, so it can't review everything. So that it's an assessment based on the work of internal audit. So do we have any questions for Kevin on his report from 24-25? Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. Kevin, if I could just pick up on one thing. On point 5.6, you've got a table in there, and I know it's been raised already about KPIs. On the percentage of planned productive days achieved, your target is 90%. But in 24-25, you dipped just below that at 88.2. I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit more information as to why you just dipped below the 90% target.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, of course, Councillor Swinburne, and apologies because I thought we'd put a little explanation in, so apologies that we've missed that out. Essentially, there were two main reasons for that during last year. One was we had a member of the team who suffered a fairly prolonged sickness absence, which dipped us a little bit below, as you would expect. And also we had a post holder leave us, and that post was vacant for a little bit longer than we would have wished before we could get that filled. So cumulatively, those two matters essentially reduced in that performance drop a little bit.
Okay, thanks for that, Kevin.
Are you satisfied? Yep. Okay. I have a query, Kevin. Taking a step back, are there any emerging risks or patterns that indicate any future control concerns, in your opinion? Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Chair. Without sort of going into too much detail, I think the short answer is yes. I think the primary one has to be connected to the cyber and the sort of AI and sort of technological advance that will bring a challenge to any organisation. We already have, I wouldn't say that's a new risk or an emerging risk, it's probably an evolving existing risk, which Jan will be more than well aware of from a discussion with Chris in digital and IT. I think that's something that we probably need to keep an increased focus on. I think, as I alluded to in my opinion report for looking towards next year, I think the organisation is already well in train in terms of the BEST programme and some of the changes which will be coming, rightly so, because of that. I think with any changing organisation brings an increase in risk naturally. So it's just being ready and aware for how we tackle that as an organisation moving forward. Nothing that I think we'd be too concerned about. It's just to be aware of.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Dale.
Yes, can I just ask just about cyber again? I know we get, we're always having training on scams and how many times have we all been caught out the odd time, whatever. But I think that actually the training material that you're given to go online, I actually wonder if it's fit for purpose. and whether you've actually looked at it as whole playbook, whatever. And you go on training, and I, in the end, think, have I got this right or what? And I think some people, even though they're really computer literate, know every scam, fail. So it's just looking at, I don't know whether anybody's been involved in any of this training, but it might be worth asking a few members how they thought about it, because that's where, you know, stopping getting into all kinds of scams and all kinds you pick up are our emails and whatever. So it's just a thought.
Right. Kevin, is that something you're happy to take away?
Absolutely, Chair. More than happy to take that away. And obviously, cyber, as you imagine, is an area of our annual work programme anyway. Obviously, Chris and the team do a lot of work, as you can imagine, in terms of keeping the organisation as safe as it has for as long as it has, which, you know, maybe sometimes shouldn't go underestimated when we see the impact on other organisations. So we are starting from a good place. But absolutely, we'll take that and sort of think about that when we next do our next piece of work.
Okay. And it's, I mean, as Councillor Dale's saying, I mean, sometimes, you know, we think, well, cybersecurity is more than just catching members out who are clicking on something they shouldn't click on in an email. But one of the major risks for people getting into a system is through that inadvertent allowing someone permission in just by clicking on, and then they've got access to a whole load of information which they can use. So it's an important gatekeeper barrier to cybersecurity. Okay, right. So we've got Kevin. It's a good report, in my opinion. It's well structured. So thank you for that. If we haven't got any further questions, then we're being asked to note the report and also that the opinion of Kevin as Chief Internal Auditor is taken account of by the organisation in finalising the annual governance statement, and we take it ourselves as a source of assurance when we consider the annual governance statement when it comes back to us. So we're being asked to note it. Can we agree those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Right. Members, we now move to the statement of accounts, which is agenda item 6. And on this, we have Councillor Oliver in attendance, who's the relevant portfolio holder, and also Jan Willis, who will deal with some of the more difficult questions that we may have. So, Councillor Oliver, do you want to introduce the statement of accounts?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say thanks to Jan and her finance team and the Treasury Management team for getting it to this point. We've, you know, another year has gone by and we're still in business and we're still in a healthy position. Also, thank you to the members. We've run 2 drop-in sessions recently for members to look at these accounts and ask any questions, and they've been really well attended. I think much more so than in previous years. We've had some very searching questions and some interesting discussions. So, thank you to everybody that's turned up to those. We basically have a draft set of accounts in front of us for consideration. The audit process begins, the external audit process begins now, and the report sets out the timetable to publication of these accounts, which is due in February 2026. The report also sets out the sort of 4 core statements in the accounts, which are the income and expenditure statements. And for those of you that have sort of worked in private businesses, that's similar to the profit and loss. The movement in reserves, which is obviously very important in a council, which does, you know, need healthy reserves, and that's can be a considerable sum of money. The balance sheet, which is basically a summary of the assets and liabilities of the council, and the cash flow, which shows where the money has come from and where it's going to. So yeah, and then there's a very useful appendix at the end, particularly for new members, which sets out the sort of terminology that's used throughout the report and explains what it all means in plain English. In summary, I'm just going to do a very, very, very quick summary of where we're at. We've ended up with a very minor underspend at the year end. But there have been some significant pressures, as we've just talked about earlier, particularly in adults, which is around about 3 million, and in children's services, which is around about 10 million. And that's been sort of offset in large part by sort of corporate savings, which have been around funding and financing and restructuring of debt. The accounts also talks about the capital program and and what's been invested in capital, and I think we can be very proud of some of the things that we've achieved in this last year. There's been over 120 million spent on transport, including the fantastic Northumberland line, which Glenn talked about earlier. We've also invested over 54 million in schools. And there are not many local authorities making that sort of investment in education anywhere in the country. And we've invested 14 million in the councils in housing stock, which is really important and which is something that comes through very strongly from members. And finally, I'll just mention the BEST programme, which is ongoing. I think is a really important piece of work, which is basically trying to drive efficiency in the council and is achieving a lot, both in terms of one-off savings and recurrent savings, and that's an ongoing program we'll hear a lot more about in the next couple of years, but delivering value for money to Northumberland residents. So that's it in a nutshell. Happy to take any questions, and as the chair said, if they're complicated, I might pass them over to officers. Thank you.
Okay, members. So this is the draft statement of accounts. It's so it'll be subject to the external auditors. So any questions on the document in front of us? Councillor Dale.
Can I just raise two issues? On page 5 of the statement of accounts, and this is looking against last year's statement of accounts. We still have the same number of households, 146,922 households, and that was the same number as last year. So I just wonder if that has changed or is it a mistake? Because I think it should be looked at, because I thought we had been building houses, and I thought would have, because it does make a difference to our council tax base.
I think you probably just spotted a typo. My gut feel is there probably are more houses in Northumberland than there were a year earlier. Certainly, just in my own ward, there's probably at least another 100. So
yes, I mean that absolutely.
So yeah, we'll have a look at that and get that corrected if it's indeed wrong.
Could you have a look? Sorry, which page is that? Page 5. And also one other, if I may, just, so I've got it in the file here, on page 6, this is important as well. There were 622,020 swims in the pools over 24-25. All right. Now, the year before, there were 712,013 swims. So there's an enormous gap in that figure. And actually, I don't know whether it's due to inequality, charging, or whatever. But I think it's important that we look at that, because we're looking at inequalities and health, etc. So that was from last year's figures and this year's figures. I would have thought maybe last year's figures were down, possibly because of COVID coming in, which was the year before, you know, running through. But to have a drop this big, if it is correct, it's nearly 100,000. It's a lot of swims to have lost. So it, you know, it has got a lot of impact on the community if that type of thing is happening.
Yes, we'll certainly look at that. So I know that Glenn had a meeting with Places Leisure, I think in the last few days, and he was just saying yesterday that that the overall picture is good. Membership of the leisure centres in Northumberland has risen, and the usage has risen. But it may be that swimming has gone down. But that we'll certainly look at that, and we'll provide an explanation.
Okay. A slightly different question, so the reserves are projected to be 37 million by 2027. Are we projecting that Advanced Northumberland is the basis on which we rely for finances as we go through the decade? Do you see what I mean?
I think I've seen what you mean, and I think the answer is no. There's obviously been a process in place. I think that the council voted on earlier in the year with regards to some restructuring of Advanced Northumberland's debt with the council, which I think is an important move. But we certainly, as a council, do not rely on we're not relying on Advanced Northumberland for sort of financial stability or reserves in any sense.
Okay, thank you. And there was, this was the debt equity swap proposal took place after the end of the financial.
So, Chair, it hasn't taken place yet. So
Right.
the decision taken at Council in March delegated the final decision to proceed with that restructuring to Cabinet. And as things currently stand, we're expecting that further report to come back to Cabinet for decision in September.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other questions to Councillor Oliver? Otherwise, we're invited to note the draft statement of accounts, and I'm inviting committee to note and agree that. Yep, thank you. Right, members, we've done agenda item 7 earlier, so we now move to 3 items which, again, our internal audit team have produced. So that's items 8A, 8B and 8C, which is the strategic audit plan from last year, the monitoring of the audit plan for this year, and any outcomes from internal audit assignments. So, Kevin, are you going to introduce these 3 items?
Yes, I will, Chair. And if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll do the first 2 together because they are sort of intrinsically linked. So, yes, thank you, Chair. So items 8A and 8B are just an outturn position to you as the Audit Committee on our audit plans for 2024-25 and the first quarter of 25-26 respectively. So each report takes exactly the same format, just covering the different sort of aspects of the timing periods. So each report just at first gives a bit of a summary information around performance, top level sort of indicators. And I've noticed, apologies to Councillor Swinburne, because I put that explanation on page 88 that he asked about earlier, so I knew I'd written it somewhere. But then on page 91 and page 105 respectively, we take each of the audit plans that have been agreed by the Audit Committee in March 2024 and March 2025. And then the final column just presents a final position statement in regard of item 8A, and in regards to item 8B for the current year, a current position statement as at the end of June 2025, or the end of the first quarter of the current year. Chair, what the reports demonstrate is that a plan is a plan at a point in time. And in any large organisation, things change, risks evolve, and we as an internal audit team have to be flexible and adept enough to be able to adapt to those changes. So we don't always achieve exactly the plan that we thought we would set out to achieve at the beginning of the year. And that's something that we monitor throughout the entire year to make sure that we are putting our resources at the areas of greatest risk. And some of those obviously may appear after we put the plan together. So that's just something to kind of bear in mind for the committee as well. Chair, again, I won't propose to go through it in any more detail, but more than happy to take any questions.
Okay. So, Kevin, I have a technical question, which is on page 88. There's a table which shows that 30% of the audits have been reprogrammed. Now that's higher than I would expect. So my question is that reprogramming expected to continue in 25-26, or do we need to make any other adjustments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. No, this is a sort of alluded to kind of, I guess, what I said in my introduction, where as we begin any year, there will be changes to the plan during that year, and those items, yes, 30% may sort of represent quite a high number, but there were 18, so that was in respect of 17 assignments. We had 18 assignments that we completed which weren't included in the plan for last year. So in terms of a like for like, it's almost a net offset. What I am, I guess, responsible for is delivering a risk-based audit service to you and the organisation, and those risks change during the year. So what that reflects is an organisation and an audit team where it is live and it changes throughout the year, which I think would be much better than an audit team sitting in isolation, almost just delivering the plan it set out at the outset, if that makes sense, Chair. So I think it's a one to watch. I don't think it's a concern, say. But yeah, I think you're right in terms of just asking that question and providing that challenge. Absolutely. It's a one that I'm not concerned about. And it's something that as we go from year to year to year, obviously, we plan on an annual basis, but an internal audit year does not begin and end on the 31st of March and the 1st of April, respectively. It does flow between years, and it is a constant and normal part of internal audit provision where we are constantly reassessing and reprogramming. Now, it may be that some of those items, Chair, just for clarity, may not actually then appear in a subsequent year's audit programme. So something which we thought was a high risk at, say, the 1st of March 2024, the 1st of April 2024, and we build that into the 2024-25 year plan, we may then see, for example, a change in legislation which completely changes the landscape, and all of a sudden something isn't a risk at all anymore. Yep. So that can change, and then it doesn't necessarily, when we then get to March 2025 and we reassess it, it actually isn't featuring as a high risk any longer. And that it would be wrong to keep something in as a piece of work if it's not a high risk. That's something that we do throughout the year. Yep. I hope that answers your question, Chair.
No, that's fine. And I mean, the point is that the audit should follow the risk. We shouldn't just slavishly say, we've got an audit plan and we're sticking to it, and there's a huge risk over here. Okay. No, I'm happy with that. Right.
Exactly. But then that's where the updates to you as the committee during the year come in to show you that where we're making those changes, you are kept up to date and aware of.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Kevin, do you want to do 8B, which is your interim monitoring statement?
Well, in essence, Chair, 8B follows exactly the same sort of format as 8A. Exactly the same sort of type of summary. Obviously, it's the numbers in terms of the PIs are a lot lower because based on 1 quarter out of 4. So please don't think we've done as badly as it may look. That's not out of 100%. Some of those are essentially out of 25% rather than 100%, if that makes sense. Yeah. But again, exactly the same format, the same very initial sort of table around planned work and the items which were included in the current year's plan, and then exactly the same format following that, Chair, on page 105, where we've kind of got the current year's plan and the current status.
Okay. Right, so members, any questions? Anne, go on.
Yeah, yes, can I just, sorry, thanks, Kevin. Can I just go and it might be part of what I'm talking about, but actually raising issues about risk, which is obviously one of our main things to Sean. Just on page 96, you've got the closure and it's about academies and school buildings and things. And really what I want to know is, we did have that concern about the solar panels and the concern about the risk of the solar panels catching fire. I don't know if anybody has raised that risk with you. My important thing is that when the academies are set up and the buildings are transferred to the academy from the council, that all the relevant information concerning all the public protection issues, etc., with that building are also transferred as well?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dale. I'm not personally aware of discussions that the risk team members may have had with the relevant service area, but if you leave that with me, I'll pick that up the next sort of time we do any work in that area, and apologies for that.
Okay.
No, I'm just raising it because it is an issue and it's part of the work you've been doing.
Yep, okay.
Thank you.
Simon.
Yeah, sorry to go sort of slightly back on what you were talking about, Kevin, and I hear what you say about the plan is a plan and it changes. But for the interim report, when you look at the planned numbers and the percentage of planned productive days achieved, they are considerably down in Q1. Yeah. So on page 100 and 101, now my question is more is the number of planned assignments 74? Is that realistic? I know you said a plan's a plan, yeah, but very few complete or substantially or being undertaken, and none are reprogrammed. And then when you look at the KPIs, is this the telling part? The first line, there's only 21% of percentage of planned productive days achieved. So is the number of tasks and activities genuine, and who sets that number? And forgive the question from someone who is not an audit person on the committee. Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Openshaw. Ultimately, I set the plan, so the plan is mine, and it's sort of my responsibility to set that plan and then to deliver it. In short, I think the answer to sort of both parts of your question relate to the fact that, as I sort of alluded to in one of my earlier comments, the audit year doesn't begin and end on the 31st of March and the 1st of April. So in the first quarter of any year, what you will see is work being undertaken on the previous year, finalising work from the previous year. So like every year, that's what's happened in this instance. So you would normally expect to see a lower proportion, if you like, in your first quarter because you're still finalising the work from the year before. What we then expect to see through sort of quarters 2 and 3 onwards is then those numbers to sort of greatly accelerate back up to the levels you would expect. I think the other point to mention in terms of the planned productive days is a similar answer to the one that I provided earlier in respect of Councillor Swinburne's answer, in that we have had a post vacant, which we have successfully filled, and we're expecting the post holder to commence next month. So then we will be back up to full strength, if you like. So it's reflecting that as well. So I'm duty bound to report Audit and Standards Committee if I think the plan won't be achieved or if I think we have resource issues, and I don't think that is the case.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Tony, do you want to come in?
It was just to quickly add on to what Kevin's just said. For comparative purposes, those percentages are very similar to where we were in the first quarter last year. think we had 22% for planned productive days achieved. I think we had 11% for the number of assignments completed. So you're right to point it out because they do look low, but we do spend quite a bit of time in Q1 finishing off last year's work and get up and running for the new year. But these percentages are almost identical to this point last year.
And I also note that you've taken on some additional tasks as well on some of these so the scope may have actually changed or increased.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think what we do, Kevin, thank you, and Tony, thank you for that. We monitor the progress each quarter and see whether these percentages are changing. And it's good news to hear that you've got a new member of staff, Kevin, because you've carried that vacancy for a while.
Yeah, it's fantastic news, Chair. It's fantastic news. Yes.
Well, you can invite that person to come to the next audit committee and they'll...
I'm sure they'd be thrilled.
Right, okay. So, members, we're invited to agree. We've considered the report from 25-26 and the progress set out for Q1 for this year and the level of coverage achieved by the internal audit people at this stage, which, Simon, was the point you've just been making. So can we agree that we've done that, which is the recommendation before us? Yeah, okay. So we're moving to item 8C, which is the outcomes from the internal audit assignments. Now, this is an area where you get the opportunity to look at the conclusions that Kevin and his team are drawing from their assignments and ask some questions on them. So this is, Kevin, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I guess this is the so what element too, which follows on from the previous sort of reports of the previous agenda items. So this just gives Audit Committee a summary of some of the findings and the work that we've undertaken in terms of finalised reports in the period of November 2024 to April 2025. And on page 119, we just for each report that we finalised, we tried just to provide that summary on one page where we're giving an idea of what we looked at, the objectives of the audit, the assurance level, which of the 13 assurance levels included in this report, the vast majority of those are substantial or reasonable, which is great. Any recommendations that were agreed, good practice highlighted, an overview of any of the main issues that we identified and what was recommended. And then the final, maybe most important box is what's happened since the audit was undertaken. Because I guess at that point, it's handed over to the service area and it's within internal audit's gift any longer. So obviously, the longer ago an audit was undertaken, there's the opportunity to put a little bit more explanation in that box because due to the passage of time. Where we've had some audits recently undertaken, agreed target dates for the implementation of recommendations may not yet have been reached. But what we've done there, Chair, is just to give an overview as best we can in terms of the progress that has been made in implementing those recommendations since our work was undertaken. Now, where recommendations, it is too early to follow them up or to sort of for them to be implemented. They don't just drop off the end into an abyss. We do go back, we do check that we monitor those. And the next section of the report just gives a bit of a summary table, summary information in terms of all live outstanding recommendations that are across the entire organisation that we do follow up, action is taken, and the service areas do take action to implement recommendations. And then there's just a bit of information on some of the other work that we've done as well, Chair, which may not necessarily result in an audit opinion as such, but is still work that we do. It's still important work, and it's still work which goes towards that annual opinion that we've sort of already talked about earlier on the agenda. So I think the most important part for me, Chair, is that one-sided summary, just so that as Audit and Standards Committee, if you're getting an annual opinion from me, which is everything's great, nothing to see here, and then we're getting work coming through here where it appears there are huge matters and huge issues, then I think quite rightly there could be some challenge. So it's for you to see some of those outcomes coming through. Obviously, it is a public report, so we can't go into sort of a great amount of detail in terms of risks and weaknesses, but we're trying to give the flavour of the matters that we identified and what's happened since. Again, Chair, more than happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. So questions on the specific outcomes that Kevin's describing in this report? Yep. Nope. Councillor Dale. Go on.
Just to ask you about the creditors' limited assurance. Sounds very technical.
Apologies, Councillor Dale, I can't hear.
My fault, sorry about that. Number 8, the creditors' assurance is limited, but it seems a very technical piece of work you've had to do. And obviously you brought a new machine in and goodness knows what. So has that been quite time consuming?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dale. It's probably not a question for me, that, Councillor Dale. It's probably maybe one for Jan, in terms of it's the service area who've done all of that work, which is within Jan's directorate. So yes, we identified some issues, but there is a lot of work gone on within the finance team, within transactional services, to improve those processes. And as you see, we're starting to see the impact of that, and certainly, as we sort of alluded to in the report, directly addressed some of the issues that we made the recommendations about by changing those processes. So yeah, I don't know if Jan wishes to add anything further.
Let's ask Jan to help out. Jan, over to you.
Yeah, so the audit identified an issue with one particular feeder system, which is now no longer being used. So you'll see in the update column there that a number of high priority recommendations were made. The one about amended invoices has been addressed because that feeder system is no longer being used. And in the other area, we've amended the processes. The issues regarding maintaining adequate records and VAT, again, are now resolved because we're not using that feeder system. And the other recommendation, the medium recommendation about timesheet auto-approval has also been addressed, and the evidence that that's been implemented has been checked by internal audit and signed off. All of those recommendations, I think, have now been implemented. And if there were any further follow-up, I would expect that now to be a reasonable or perhaps even a substantial opinion. But the point about the new system is that, you know, that's an instance of good practice. So that's where we are using a new piece of software to identify potential duplicate payments before they actually go out, before those payments go out, as opposed to running those reports retrospectively and then having to recover the income. So that's an instance of good practice that was identified as part of this audit work.
Yes, I mean, taking into account all the creditors there are.
Yes.
I mean, yes, it's just, but yeah, one machine that's not working can make an awful lot of problems. One feeder.
Oh, one feeder system, yes. Yes, and we have lots of feeder systems that feed into our creditor system. So it's really important that when we're looking at assurance around our creditor payments, that we don't just look at the creditor payments system itself in Oracle, that we are looking at each and every one of those feeders, making sure that information is flowing through correctly, because as was identified here, if that's not the case, then it does mean that we can't have assurance that we are paying out the correct amount to creditors and accounting for the VAT properly. But as I say, all of those recommendations have been implemented now, so that should no longer be an issue.
Thank you.
Okay. Members, any further questions on the outcomes of the internal audits? If not, we're being asked to agree the recommendation, which is that we've considered the key findings, the management responses as summarised. So if we're in agreement, I'm going to move us on. Thank you, members. So we now come to agenda item 9, which is the Treasury Management Annual Report. And I'm assuming, Councillor Oliver, we're going to take these items separately. So that's over to you to introduce Treasury Management Annual Report, with Jan coming in to assist you as necessary.
Where needed, yeah. Thank you, Chair. So this, in a nutshell, for the benefit of new members, is a report that explains how the Council manages its money, cash reserves, investments, lending and borrowing, and the sort of the procedures and the rules and the limits and things that sort of that control that. The report also sets out the economic context in which we're operating, which I think is is still a bit shaky and with inflation and interest rates both being quite stubbornly high. And it also summarises how we as the Council have performed against the indicators, which, as always, is very well. The strategy that sort of underpins this report was agreed in February, I think at the meeting where we agreed the budget, and it's one of the sort of package of things that's agreed then every year. A few other sort of key points. Borrowing remains expensive. The PWLB, Public Works Loan Board rates are which are all sort of linked to the gilts market, are stubbornly high, and higher indeed than they were after the disastrous trust mini budget. And the 25-year rate is nearly at 6%. So that sort of explains some of the sort of slight rise in sort of aggregated borrowing costs. But on the flip side, investment rates are higher too. Page 141 sets out the council borrowing and where the money has been borrowed from, and those figures include the borrowing that has been undertaken for loans to Advance Northumberland, the Health Trust, and Newcastle Airport, and one or two other very small ones. The next section sets out the capital finance financing requirement, which is basically how much we need to borrow, and I think there was quite a detailed discussion about in one of the drop-in sessions about this, but basically it's to underpin the capital programme, and then there are limits set around that, and we operate well within those limits. As I've just mentioned, average borrowing costs have risen as loans mature and new loans are taken out. And then the next section summarises the Council's investments and sort of highlights the fact that because interest rates are relatively high, that much of the sort of available cash balances are used as internal borrowing rather than invested, because that actually saves us money. So I think they're the sort of key points that I drew out of the report. Hope that's helpful, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So, Councillor Oliver, can I just check? I think you've covered this, but there hasn't been any unplanned borrowing or debt refinancing that's unexpected?
No, my understanding is I think there's been a bit of debt refinancing to actually reduce the interest costs, where there was an opportunity to refinance at a lower rate than currently paying, and that's helped the sort of revenue position. And there's also been quite a degree of sort of capital reprofiling, so the borrowing for capital expenditure has been less than was originally forecast at the beginning of a year ago. So yeah, no, I'm not aware of any unplanned borrowing, and certainly we borrowed less than we planned to.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Dale, come on.
I was just going to say, we were almost thinking about training, that we would ask the independent managers to come and give us a training or talk about how they manage all the treasury management and with the county council's officers too. But it's the external people who I don't know what they're called. John?
Sorry, Chair, we don't have external investment managers. All of our cash balances and treasury operations are managed in-house. We have advisors who input into the strategy.
Yes, sorry. I mean, it's just, yes.
Okay, sorry, are you saying that you've requested that our treasury management advisors come and provide training to this committee?
Yes, that was agreed quite a long time ago.
Well, I wasn't aware of that, Councillor Dale, so I'm not sure who agreed
You
it.
probably weren't there, but it was just something we discussed quite a long time ago, and I think even in training they said, oh yes, advice they would come along. And I just think, and then somebody said, well, maybe the whole of the council of members would like to come as well. So it was quite an open conversation. So I was just going to say whether that was actually going ahead or not, because when you're talking about this, it's quite a big picture, and it's all very convoluted for some people who, about treasury management. So whether it was a good idea or not, I don't know. But it wasn't me who suggested it, but it was suggested, and everybody agreed.
Check that feed into the conversations about the training programme for the committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think, now I can't remember this one, but I think it does seem sensible, given how important treasury management is, that we as a committee, and we can not make it available to other councillors as necessary as they want, but that we should get some form of when we say training, it's more of a sort of seminar discussion that will be helpful, led by Jan, either yourself or others. So if we put that on the sort of training plan, then does that help, Councillor Dale?
Yes, it was. Yes, I think that's what everybody wanted.
Right. Members, any other questions on the Treasury Management Annual Report? Otherwise, I'm going to... Now, this one's quite important because we're not just noting it. We've received this report and we're presenting it or forwarding it to full council. So are we content to forward this report to full council? Yep. We're agreed.
Can I just ask a question, and slightly naively, but when I look at the draft accounts to the end of thing, the cash equivalents that are sitting there in the balance sheet at £64 million, so this is to do with the Section 106 money that we take from developers that then has supposedly to be sent out to the projects that it's designated for. But within the accounts, I don't see any liabilities within the statement for this cash that's due to be paid out.
I'm going to ask Jan to help you with that one.
So any Section 106 monies are held in a reserve, and all of our reserves form part of our cash balances. So, and that cash it's not invested separately, so we don't have a separate investment strategy for Section 106 or any other specific reserves. All of our cash is pooled and managed on that basis, and managed on a daily basis. So we forecast how much cash we're going to need today, tomorrow, next week, and any surplus cash is then invested to earn some short-term interest, or as we have a short-term borrowing stance, and that is part of our agreed strategy, we use those cash balances in lieu of external borrowing. So, so you're right that any unused Section 106 monies form part of that overall cash balance, and we earn a bit of interest until such time as those reserves are drawn down, because an agreed scheme that meets the original planning conditions and the conditions attached, because there are trigger points attached to the payment and the, you know, the use of Section 106 monies. Until we reach that point, we just hold that money in a reserve, and as I said, it forms part of our overall cash balance.
Yeah, but surely, you know, that money is due to be paid out to these projects. Yes. Maybe not at the 31st of March, but is there as a longer term liability to the council. Should that not be stated in the accounts?
Maybe defer to our external audit colleagues, but no, my understanding is it's a reserve, it's an asset. We do not have to recognise an equivalent liability. That, you know, as and when the money, you know, those future commitments are entered into, the money has already been set aside to meet them. So to recognise a liability equivalent to the value of the reserve would you know, would negate the reserve itself, and that's not my understanding, you know, of how we should account for it. But as I say, I defer to external audit colleagues if they have a different view.
You know, it's a good question. I love talking about liabilities. It depends on what commitments there actually are. For you to have a liability on the balance sheet, there would need to be that event which has happened, which gives rise to that liability. And I think from what Jan's saying is at the moment that hasn't breached that threshold yet. So you've got to have that clear past event to give rise to that liability. Otherwise you can't recognise a liability. It wouldn't be appropriate. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't give you the answer you want, but it's the sort of realistic, the very strict rules under accounting for when you recognise a liability, and if that threshold hasn't been breached, you can't recognise one.
Thank you.
Are you
Chair,
content?
can I...
Reasonably content?
You know, because obviously these are legal agreements
Yes.
with developers.
Yeah.
So at some point, this gap, you know, when they sign these agreements, it's designated to what area it's got to go towards. So surely that is a liability for the council moving forward if they're sitting on the cash.
Right.
Sorry, Chair, I think in accounting terms, as Diane's just explained, you only recognise the liability when certain conditions have been met. Okay. But in terms of understanding and presenting, you know, what those future outlays might be based on those legal agreements, I think that's a slightly separate issue. It's not an accounting issue per se, you know, because we are required to account on a really clear basis for those future liabilities. But in terms of recognising that at future dates that money is going to have to be drawn down because we have those legal agreements. I think that's a slightly different. I wouldn't regard that as an accounting issue. I think that's more about a presentational issue that aids understanding. So, you know, I think I understand where you're coming from, but recognising it as a liability in the statement of accounts, I don't, you know, in contravention of the clear guidance about when you should recognise a liability, I don't think is the right way to do it. I think there might be another way for us to address the point that you're making.
Sorry, you know, I'm not being pedantic about this, but, you know, if I was running a business and signed a contract to sell something or buy something, you know, and I was still sitting on that asset at my year end, okay, that has to be taken into account in your, you know, in your positions, in your.
Sorry, Chair, I think the accounting guidance is quite clear that you only recognise that liability where certain conditions have met, and our position, which will be subject to confirmation by the external auditors, those conditions have not yet been met, and so we have recognised. You know, so we have accounted for those potential future liabilities correctly in the statement of accounts. But I think there's probably a wider sort of debate about the presentation. I would regard this more of a management accounting issue about understanding your future liabilities and how they're going to be funded, which I think is not a pure accounting issue. I think that's a wider sort of financial management debate to be had. But Chair, I think...
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Councillor Lambert, it's a good question, and we've had a decent discussion about it. Now, I'm going to go with Councillor Oliver because he had his hand up first, and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of the Section 106 agreements is that many of them are quite vague in terms of the money is going to be spent on education or on roads or on and so that money sits in a reserve. But the other point worth noting is that probably in most cases when that money is actually spent, it's spent in a capital way, and therefore you've got cash on the balance sheet and that cash disappears, and then you have an asset on the balance sheet, and so there is a sort of flow that residents would recognise. The money is being obtained to be spent in the communities. It gets spent in the communities, and those community assets get shown on the balance sheet.
Right. Now, Councillor Elliott, over to you, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, it was just coming back to the 106 and possibly the usable reserves as well. In the two sessions we were allowed to walk into, just coming to the lady said the trigger point. So I've noticed that there were some trigger points 3-4 years past now. So in your section 106 balance that you use in your reserves on the accounting, is it beneficial to the council to retain this in the accounts and not send this money out to the communities when the trigger point was met? Because I've raised an issue that communities from all over Northumberland are desperate for this money that's being allocated specifically. I would kind of politely disagree with Nick's word that it's vague. When a section 106 agreement is drawn up with huge sums of money at times, it is detailed. It tells you what it's going to be spent on and when it should be spent. And what I've kind of found, I think other people's found over the whole of Northumberland, is that there's huge sums of money being sitting for 3-4 years and that were triggered 3-4 years ago. Is it of a benefit for the council to keep it on the balance sheets and not in the community? And just why would you miss the trigger points? And then the usable reserves, I've never had an understanding. I've asked the question a few times. That same figure, usable to me, means if the community screams for it through the correct committee, get it used into the community, or is it better for the finance officer to keep the accounts propped up with that money and not being usable in the communities?
Right. I think I understand the point you're making. I'm going to ask, we're straying into the wider issue of Section 106 agreements. I'm going to ask Jan, did you have any observations on the point from Councillor Elliott, and then we're going to move on.
I think that's a policy discussion, not an accounting issue, is my brief answer. And as a policy matter, I would say it's not for this committee. And I'm, it may well be that it needs to be taken up elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm going to confirm that. I mean, the issue of the council use of Section 106 agreements is not contained within the Treasury Management Annual Report that we're considering. So, I mean, I think we had a good discussion about the point that you raised, Councillor Lambert, but I'm going to move us on. Now, last word, and then I'm going to move us on.
Disregard the 106 then the usable reserves. So please disregard the 106. So we'll go to the usable reserves. Why not use them? Is my never had an understanding of if it's usable. It's like you've got a reserve fund to protect the council for the rainy day or whatever might happen.
Yeah.
The usable reserve money, why are we keeping a hold of it when communities are desperate for money to be used? Thank you for allowing us that.
And the answer to that is they're held for specific purposes. So in some cases it's grant money that has been given for a very specific purpose and has not yet been fully spent. But in the budget, we do set out the planned use of those reserves over each of the next 3 years. So it's not that there isn't a plan to spend it. And that does form part of the budget, because drawing down from those reserves is one of the funding sources for the medium-term financial plan. So I think in virtually all cases, you know, there are plans to actually use that money. It's not just sitting there, and there aren't any plans to use it.
Right. Okay. Well, Councillor Lambert, Councillor Elliott, thank you for coming in with that. I mean, we've been relying on Councillor Dale for questions, so you've helped with the heavy lifting. Right. Okay. Now, members, I'm just going to repeat the point from earlier. Are we content to present this report to County Council? And I'm sure at County Council there may be some opportunities to ask some questions. Right. I'm now going to move us on to 9B, which is the Private Finance Initiative and similar contracts. Now, this was the one where there was we've circulated the right document. Right. So my understanding is we've got a PFI waste disposal contract. We may have others. Who's going to present this one? Councillor Oliver, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think that this will be the shortest, hopefully, of all of the reports. This is effectively a procedural report, and the council is required to share its sort of accounting policies to agree those council accounting policies. And this report explains how PFI contracts are dealt with in the accounts following some changes to the SIPFA code. And they basically affect the balance sheet valuations of assets covered by PFI contracts. It's also worth noting this is a sort of retrospective report following a previous delegated authority. And that's set out on page 167. And the appendix basically explains the technical nature of the report, which I don't intend to go into.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the PFI contracts? If not, we're going to move on. So we've noted the PFI contracts accounting policy. Now, members, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I'm going to move you to item 9C. Now, this is the corporate risk management update. Now, let me explain. On the papers before you, there is a detailed backgrounder on some of the risks. Now, if we as a committee want to discuss the details that are on the pink or the red papers, then we need to move into a private discussion, excluding the press and members of the public. And the reason for that is that there is some financially sensitive material in there. So if we decide that we want to have that detailed discussion, then I'm going to have to move us into a private meeting. If we have a discussion on the generality of the risks that are facing the council and the council's response, then we don't need to. So I just caution members, if you say, well, on page 261 on the pink papers it says this, then as I say, the guidance, the advice I've been given is that we move into a private discussion. So does that help? Okay, right. So again, just for clarity, the risks facing the council are owned by the members of the cabinet and the senior officers. They're the ones who have responsibility and accountability to recognise, to manage those risks and to take mitigation actions. The role of the audit committee is to satisfy itself that there's a proper system of risk management in place, and that those risks and the mitigations being taken are proportionate. So that is the role of audit committee. It's I mean, I don't know if that helps, but I'm trying to give you some distinctions between people who own the risks and people who are asking questions about the risks, which is us. Now, Councillor Oliver, are you going to present this one? You're only
I will,
informed
yes.
this
Yeah.
morning.
I've already presented this report to Cabinet,
Yes.
and there's been a lot of detailed discussion with officers. I think the first point to make is that this is a simplified document, and it basically takes what we previously had, which was last reviewed in 2016, which was a sort of a strategy and a policy, and it kind of merges it into one much clearer, much more simple document. So everybody understands what the process is, what needs to be done, and what the sort of checks and balances are. Any large organisation faces significant internal and external risks, and Northumberland County Council is no different. So it's therefore beholden on us to try and identify what those risks are and mitigate against them. And as the Chair has already said, every one of the risks listed in the report are assigned to an Executive Director and also to a Cabinet Member. And the Cabinet Member and the Executive Director are required together to consider those risks. And there are a set of basically mitigating actions that are put against each risk, and they are monitored for progress. So I've seen this sort of process evolve over the last 8 years, and I think it's pretty sort of highly sophisticated now and pretty robust. But I would say that, wouldn't I? The things listed in this report probably shouldn't be any surprise. They are, in most cases, the risks that any large organisation would face. I'll just pick out a sort of couple of examples that we've already talked about today, so we don't need to get into the sort of detail of a private session. But cybersecurity is obviously a risk for any big company. We have lots of processes in place to try and mitigate against any cyber attacks, and we all, including members, have a responsibility to take part in that and play our own part. We've talked about BEST as well today. That's a really important program that the council is working through, and of course, with any risk, it's all about sort of change management. There is a risk that certain things that are predicted may not happen, and that is monitored and reviewed regularly. And so each risk is assigned a score that it's currently at, and the target score. And then there's a set of measures that are listed in the report in the pink papers that are being undertaken to take us from the current score to the target score. And I think it's probably true that if we said that we were at our target score for every single risk, nobody would believe us, because I don't think any organisation probably is. So it's sort of, but we are working very hard to improve and mitigate all of those risks. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So, Councillor Oliver, my question, and I look to officers to advise me if I'm straying into the pink papers, but on the capital project delivery and the costs, are you, from the discussion with Cabinet, are you sufficiently satisfied that they're being properly monitored and mitigated against?
Yes, and it is true that capital projects are a particular risk in a sort of since COVID. Costs have risen, and there've been a lot of international factors, and a lot of the capital program is around building things, and building costs have risen, and so it is a significant risk. But it's a risk that is managed through the procurement process, and it's a risk that's managed through the sort of project management processes as well. And those large projects, are not without cost escalation, but that is managed. And then there are various mitigating things that can be done, either taking out work, changing the scope of work to get the get it back, or looking for other ways to finance it, more money. So yeah, I think it's been widely reported in the press, you know, about the Northumberland line. That it's cost more than it originally was intended to, and there's been you know, extra funding put in by the council and extra funding put in by government to meet those costs. And but what shouldn't and doesn't happen is you get to the end of a project and you find at that point that it's cost a lot more than you originally anticipated it to.
And am I right in thinking you mentioned the post-COVID, post-Ukraine war? I mean, capital projects, I mean, inflation is running at about 20% for capital projects.
That probably sounds about right. I mean, I think it's peaked and gone back down a little bit, but it hasn't gone back down anywhere like as far as it was back in 2020.
Yeah. Councillor Jan, sorry.
So you promoted me. Well, yeah, I mean, I think this risk, as it's described, focuses very much on whether we're taking full advantage of securing external funding for some of those big infrastructure projects. I think we've done pretty well in recent years, but inflation has been a really significant challenge for us, capital contract inflation, and the eventual cost of some of those externally funded schemes has escalated, and in many cases, you know, the original funders are reluctant to, you know, to put more money into the pot, and that then is a risk that comes back to the council. But I think in terms of actually, you know, securing external funding to enable some of those big infrastructure projects to go ahead, we've done a really good job. But in the process, we have created a bit of a problem for ourselves, and that is one of the reasons why I think we've struggled to deliver against the planned capital programme, because when that happens and you've suddenly got a significant shortfall, and the Northumberland line is a good example of that, some of the borderlands projects could also point to, everything has to be paused while you have those discussions to work out, you know, whether you can actually find another way of funding it, or whether you need to go back to the original business case and the scope and go round houses again. And often where they are projects which have external government funding, there is, you know, a protracted process of then agreeing any project variations and getting it through, you know, government officials and then the relevant ministerial decisions. So it can build in massive delays to the delivery of the programmes, as well as, you know, often that problem, or at least part of that problem, ending back with the council to deal with. But that's all part of sort of like the day-to-day sort of like management of those big schemes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dale.
I'll on to that one, Jan. Can you be assured that we have the capital manpower resources to take these projects forward as quickly as we would like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think project management capacity is the big issue. I don't think that that's the big challenge. It's not that we don't have the project management capacity. And when we get external funding, you know, for these big projects, it does include, you know, provision for the project management costs. I think where there is a challenge is when you've got lots of these big infrastructure projects which are all happening concurrently, and sometimes it's about it's more about our strategic capacity to manage a really big portfolio, rather than the project management resource for each individual project within that portfolio, if that makes sense.
No, I see that it's overreaching, maybe, the amount of projects you're taking on.
But that is one of the reasons why we have put additional capacity into, strategic capacity into regeneration and place, which is where most of these big projects are being delivered. to try and address that. But it is a challenge, quite right.
Can I just add that I note and thank Audit for actually picking up, because their audits are actually all taken up under risk capital. So where we've got limited assurance, these are recognised under risks, which I think is good.
So the risk profile is aligned with the audit profile. We're getting the same messages from both ends of the spectrum. Okay, now members, we're being asked to agree the recommendation that we've received and noted, the risk report. Just looking ahead, if we're going to take one more agenda item, which is corporate fraud, and then we're going to have a short break. Later on in the meeting, if we want to return to the pink papers and have if you've still got the energy, have a more detailed discussion on some of the risks, then we will do that. But for the moment, can we agree that we've noted the risk report presented by Councillor Oliver? Agreed. Thank you. Right. So final item before we have a break. So we haven't finished, so don't go away. But corporate fraud. So again, we're being asked to consider the work of the corporate fraud team. And Councillor Oliver, is this you again?
I'm afraid so. This is the last time you'll hear from me in this meeting. And Amy's here, who's the council's corporate fraud manager, to answer any.
Yes, of course. Sorry, Amy. So, for members, Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can do. So I'm Amy Hodgson, the manager of the corporate fraud team. We sit within audit and risk as well. So the two teams are quite aligned in what we're doing. And yes, we'll bring reports to this committee every 6 months, and it is our annual report. Thank you. Thanks.
Sorry, and we had a very good session on corporate fraud. We had a training session last year that Amy you led for us, which was a good one. Right, Councillor Oliver. Back to
this
you.
won't be as good, but I'll do my best. Basically, this report sets out the work that's been done on corporate fraud over the last 12 months. And Amy's team is a small team, but they do some very important work. And as Amy said, part of the internal audit team. Page 186 sets out the areas that the work has been focused on, and you'll see that over 65% of that, in terms of the numbers of cases, not the actual value, but the numbers of cases, have been related to council tax, and 24% related to housing. The biggest financial impact, though, is in the housing area, and there's two elements to that. I think the one which is basically stopping social housing being sold fraudulently under the right to buy rights, and that obviously is quite a significant issue, because the value of each house that disappears under the right to buy is an asset that's no longer owned by the council or some of the social housing providers, Gentuk, Carbon and Benicia, that Amy's team do work for. And then once it's lost, it's gone, and that's no longer a community asset for people who need it to use. So really important that any fraudulent attempts to buy those houses are stopped. And Amy has described to us previously how a lot of the inquiries that are made when people start the process are then withdrawn, and that means that the house effectively stays with its rightful owner. And then the other element is of housing relates to people being in a council house or a social housing provider house effectively when they shouldn't be. And that's really important as well. It's less of a sort of financial issue, but it's a really important social issue, because actually if somebody's occupying a house that they shouldn't occupy, then somebody that actually needs it can't occupy it. And we know that we would like to have more social housing in pretty much all of our communities across the county, so that's really important work. And then just, as I've already highlighted, there's a lot of, the report lists all of the other areas which the team work on. I won't go into any detail on that. I'm sure you may have questions, but I'll draw it to a close there.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver. Questions, members, on corporate fraud? Councillor Swinburne, you go first.
Thank you, Chair. Amy, thanks for bringing this report. Just a couple of things. I know it's titled corporate fraud, but as it says lower down, it is fraud and error. So it's not purely down to fraud. Some of it is uncovered just purely by people making mistakes on applications and things like that. But it does show up some quite surprising figures and savings that is made by your department, which is very welcome. But what I wanted to ask was, and it's one particular thing, it's in relation to the significant increase in savings on the blue badges. Now, I know there was a targeted campaign for a day last year, but that quite significant increase, is that brought about purely by the sort of admin side and checks and balances, or was it more, I'd be interested to know, was it more around like the parking services side doing checks? Because if it's leaning more towards parking services doing, a lot of their checks, people just think parking services, or they go out and slap tickets on cars, and, people hate them for doing that. And the idea is that it's to smooth traffic flow and make it safer for people. But if they're doing these types of checks as well, and making sure that they're being used properly, that's another string to their bow, as it were. And if we've just done a target campaign and a lot of that leans more towards the work they've done, as well as the back office, it shows that we've done a target thing and massively increased this. And it just makes us think, is there a lot more out there that is, being misused? I'm not trying to jump on people legitimately using blue badges, but if we've just done a target and it's massively increased this way, it just makes you think, is there possibly more misuse out there? So just trying to get a bit more background on that, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So that was very much our view a few years ago when we first started looking at the misuse of blue badges. Those people that have got a blue badge, it's necessary for them to get out and about. A lot of people wouldn't get out without them. This is children through to adults, right across the spectrum. So we did identify that through doing these targeted campaigns years ago, because this National Day of Action's been in place for a number of years now, and on the back of that, ourselves and parking services have sort of teamed together. It's always been an offence to misuse a blue badge, and we have over the years had odd referrals come through. Because they weren't regular, we didn't have sort of any streamlined processes in place. Because it's been identified as a more widespread issue, over the last 2 years, we've worked together with parking services to sort of join forces, provide training, advice and guidance, where now we're in a position, which you can see from the figures we're reporting on from last year, that we've got a really good process whereby civil enforcement officers, when they're out doing the checks of people parking illegally, are actively reviewing the use of these disabled persons' blue badges, speaking to people in the community about the use, checking the blue badges if possible, and where misuse is suspected, retaining the blue badge, and then that then comes into my team, and we take whatever action may be appropriate based on the circumstances of the misuse. So it is something that is ongoing and that will continue. It's not just a specific period that we're looking at. Yes, that day of action would tend to put a few more feet on the ground. That's more about raising... That's just about sort of raising public awareness about use. The processes in place is something that's there all day, every day.
Okay. I have a quick question. There was mention of a fraud risk register. Have we rolled that out? Is that rolled out appropriately across the council?
So if you'll remember, Chair, that's something that we did bring to a previous a previous meeting, and that's just something that will be ongoing. And
right. And are you happy that areas that are particularly risky have got the risk register, or they understand what it's for?
That's something that we'll have to align with my colleagues within risk. I think risk management. That's something that would have to align with them. The risk register that we brought to this committee was more about looking at the national fraud risks and how that then compared to Northumberland's fraud risks. Do we have the same fraud risks, or is different? What process and procedures do we already have in place to mitigate those? And one of the things that Jan mentioned earlier was about the system that identifies the duplicate payments, because that's quite a high national risk. So we've got some really good processes in place already, and then identified what we can do better. Now, if you'll remember, one of the biggest things that came out of that was fraud awareness training. And on the back of that, we did that session with yourselves, and we've rolled out some sessions with other departments, and we're working at the minute. It's impossible to roll out fraud awareness right across the council, but we are looking to develop like an e-learning package, but something that's a little bit more interactive and relevant to Northumberland risks.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions for Councillor Oliver or for Amy on corporate fraud? Otherwise, we're being asked to agree that we've considered and noted the progress being made. And that's it? Right. Agreed. Thank you. Right. Now, members, I'm in your hands. We can either have a very short break, and I think I'm getting a few nods. Right. We're going to have a short 5-minute break just to, make sure we don't get clots in our legs from sitting here for 2 hours. And then we'll just finish off the rest of the agenda, which includes an update from our external auditors from Fortis Mazars, who've been sitting very patiently at the end there. Right, so members, 5 minutes back here, and then we'll carry on. Thank you. of a break is the break becomes a very long one. And I did say we'd hope to have 5 minutes. So if we can take our places. So we're moving to agenda item 10, which is the Group Audit Committee work. Now this is, Tony, is Kevin going to present this or are you going to present this?
I think Kevin is.
Right.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Just to say, the responsibilities of this audit committee are not just for the county council, but for the group of organisations that make up Northumberland County Council. That includes Advanced Northumberland and I think Active Northumberland. So there's a wider responsibility that we hold. Right, Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so in terms of the Group Audit Committee responsibility, you're right, Chair. Audit Committee has that role in respect of all active group entities. At the moment, Advanced Northumberland is the only group of companies within or active entities within that group. So that's why this report only relates to Advanced Northumberland. And essentially what this report does, Chair, is just bring to Audit and Standards Committee this morning just what's been previously agreed to be provided, which is a copy of the plan for the current year for that entity, and then a sort of a quarterly update sort of basis around what happens on that plan. So basically the report provides a summary version of the plan which was agreed with Advanced Northumberland Group of Companies in April at its Audit Committee. So Audit and Standards Committee can see that and have oversight over that. And then also reflecting that at the Audit Committee meetings of Advanced Northumberland, we've also recently taken some reports or outcomes of reports which are detailed at the bottom of page 195, where we had 4 reports which were all issued with a reasonable assurance level. And we also provided Advanced Northumberland with its own annual opinion, which was also a reasonable level of assurance, and that was taken to June's meeting. Chair, the report, obviously we have to be very careful when we talk about the commercial sensitivities associated with Advanced Northumberland, and it is a group of companies. But the work's been, this report's been prepared on that basis, so it's wide, but obviously it's written in such a way where we're not sort of going into too much detail. I think the only the point to make, Chair, is regarding yourself. So in addition to me taking reports or internal audit reports to Advanced Northumberland's Audit Committee, our Chair has a standing invitation to observe Advanced Northumberland Audit Committee meetings, which you attend in that capacity and see and hear the challenge and discussion which goes on in the other reports which are presented to those committees other than from me as the internal auditor. And I think certainly you were at both the 2 meetings which are sort of referred to in the report, Chair. So that's all I'm proposing to say, subject to answering any questions. But Chair, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything from the fact that you attended those meetings too.
Okay. Thank you. So, as Kevin says, so I have a standing invitation to attend their audit committee. I have done so on 2 occasions so far this year. And my observations are there have been good discussions at that audit committee on risk management, on cyber security, on matters relating to cross-year accounting. So it's a mature committee, a mature audit committee, and I will continue to attend that meeting and, as necessary, report back to this committee. I don't have anything else to add on that. Are there any questions to Kevin regarding the group finance audit work? Nope. Kevin, I'm just going to ask one question, which is, is the level of audit scrutiny proportionate to the risk? And I'm thinking about the loans that are made to Advance, which are not insignificant. So are we content that the audit scrutiny is proportionate in terms of the risk to the council?
Thank you, Chair. As in the level of audit, internal audit activity, is that just to be clear? Yes. So yes, Chair. Again, we undertook some work during the previous year relating to controls in place, specifically around the management of sort of the cash flow and the loans and that financial arrangement, which is in place between the council and Advance Northumberland. We also are aware that there are other reports and other pieces of work in train or completed or recently completed or in train at the moment regarding that whole arena. So it is reflected in our work in the current year where it needs to be, but it's probably one that we will keep on review, Chair, because while some of these actions from other methods, if you like, are taking shape and moving, it's something that we will continue to review. So I think our work on this area is not finished, but I don't think the timing was right for us to do a great deal of work in the 25-26 year because of work we did last year and changes that we know are happening or about to happen also.
Yep. Okay. No, and I recognise the work that you referred to last year, so I'm happy with that. Jen, is there anything you want to add on that one?
Well, just to note, Chair, that obviously, this work programme is about, about getting assurance about the effectiveness of internal control within the companies. In addition, this committee receives other reports. So, for example, the local partnerships review came to this committee earlier in the year, looking at the effectiveness of the arrangements, from the council perspective in relation to management of wholly owned companies. So I think, this committee should be taking assurance from both perspectives. Yes. And in that context, I would suggest that, you're probably getting what you need in order to get that assurance. But of course, if the committee would like more, we can discuss what that might look like.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think the point's well made that we should be looking to triangulate the assurance that we're getting, not just saying, oh well, Kevin's doing internal audit work. And as you say, we had the report from Advance Partnerships. Local partnerships. Right. Okay, members, again, we're being asked to note the internal audit activity carried out in relation to Advance Northumberland. Are we content to agree the recommendation there? Yep. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, a slight change of perspective, because we now have the external auditors who sit beyond the council and give us their professional assessment of the council's governance, financial performance, and so on. So I'm going to, I don't think many of you have met them before, so I'm going to ask them, Diane and Mark, to introduce themselves and then give us the update, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Mark Kirk. I'm a partner with Forbes Mazar, and I've been doing the external audit for Northumberland for a couple of years, but I have signed off several years' accounts and given the audit opinions and issued our value for money reports there. And Diane, who will take you through the update, is the audit engagement manager.
Thank you, and hello to those who I haven't met yet. As Mark says, I'm the manager on the Northumberland County Council external audit, and I've been involved for a few years now. And I think Forbes Mazar took over the council's audit back in 1920, And whilst I wasn't the manager for this audit at that point, I was involved from the very start in various guises. So I've gotten to know the council well. The update on our audit is that we will be bringing to the November Audit and Standards Committee our audit completion report, which will set out the results of our audit work. We started our audit at the beginning of July and it will run through until October. We've got a little bit of contingency with it being a November audit committee because we need assurance from the pension fund auditor. So this council is part of the Tyne and Wear Pension Fund, so we have to wait until that auditor has done its work, which feeds into our assurance. That's the same as in prior years, and we're hoping, because there has been a backlog on council audits, that that happens by November and we can get signed off. If it doesn't, we'll make sure we draw everything to a line and get work done so we can pick it up. Nothing really to highlight in terms of any issues at this stage. It's quite early during the audit. We have established arrangements for working with the council, query logs, weekly meetings. One thing that struck me listening earlier in this committee was we were talking about capital project management, and I work on a number of other councils and NHS bodies as well. And it's been quite striking to me the level of capital expenditure this council has compared to some, which is classed as REFCUS, and that's revenue expenditure funded from capital under statute, which I know some of you may have heard of. And what that is, it's when the council is managing spend on assets which it doesn't own. So the Northumberland line, for example, a lot of the spend on that, it's not on assets that the council owns, but it's project managing it, it's the accountable body. But just this year, when I was sat comparing a couple of audits, I thought, crikey, Northumberland really does have quite a high level of what we call REFCUS, which it's project managing. And that's not to say it's doing more and other councils are doing less, but it just reflects the scale of the activity. I think it's something like 100 million REFCUS in 24-25, which is quite high. And I noticed that when I was picking our sample. You've got NG Central Campus, the Northumberland line. And yeah, it was just noticeable and it was a bit of interest. We sample test all of that, as you'd expect, during our audit work. And we'll report any findings. We also sample test reserves, movements to and from, and the results of that we will report in our audit completion report later in the year. As I said, nothing of real note to say at this stage. I will save the excitement for our November report when I can talk to you about, there's a really exciting new standard we've been implementing called IFRS 16, and that's leases. So the council's had to do lots of work on that. We're having to do lots of work. It won't change the world, but we will report to you in November on that basis. Very happy to take any questions, Chair, but otherwise that's our brief verbal update for now.
Okay, thank you. Questions to our external auditors? Okay. One of the reasons why we ask our external auditors to sit through our meetings is not because we're, it's one of the things that they draw their conclusions on is how this committee performs. So if this committee is active and challenging and asking questions, that is something that assists them in their assessment of our corporate health. So that's the reason why. Councillor.
Yeah, I'd noticed, I think the last year's the final sign-off, I think it was for the 2023-24, I don't know if you were involved, took quite a long time. Obviously that's in the past now, I believe. What's the kind of considered normal time for a council year-end to getting an external full audit, a full good health check? Because obviously there was something wrong with that for it to take so long. What's the normal period we would expect to get a full external audit, full health check? Thank you.
So if I may, Chair,
Yes.
Normally, if you talk back pre-pandemic, the deadline and the audit would have been done within 3 months, so usually the end of September. It's been quite a few years since any council's had that done. And there is the majority of councils, or many councils across the country, have missed the deadline for consecutive years due to a variety of factors. So that norm of the 3 years has not been achieved across the entire sector, bar a few exceptions. There have even been exceptional issues where we've disclaimed opinions on accounts, and this is under the new rules to try and reduce the backlog. There's a whole myriad, and I won't bore you on it, but there's a whole load of issues around. There's insufficient capacity in the audit sector. Nobody wants to be an auditor. It's not an attractive job. There aren't the skilled people there to do it. There have been capacity pressures within councils. There have been very big technical issues, which have been a major factor in holding up. It's all come down to actually councils aren't getting their audits delivered in a timely manner, so the governance isn't there. So central government put in these rules, which meant auditors could just disclaim audits that weren't finished and try and get back on an even keel. At this council, the delays were linked back to the Solace review, the Canna review going back some years ago, and various other factors. After a lot of work, the council, that was all brought back on track largely last year, and we signed off 23-24 after about 5 months, 4 months. And this is our first year of trying to do it in a normal fashion. So November is an achievable target for us, and it's reasonable. I've given you a lot of information there, so if I'm not sure if you're familiar with the backlog for councils, but just to give you some assurance that for this council, we're doing what we can to get back on track. It's not the only council where there have been delays for other various reasons. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And obviously one of the roles of this committee is to monitor the progress so that, as Diane says, that November date is, I think the word you used was achievable. So we need to keep an eye on that, and we will. Right. Right, members, are we... Sorry, Diane, I didn't mean to cut across you. Have you concluded your report?
Nothing more from me, thank you.
Right. And Mark, you're... Okay. So, members, we're noting the report from Mazars. So the final item, well, agenda item 12, we have what's called a monitoring report and an action log. So there's, on page 200 and 200, it sets out the work of the committee over the coming year, and obviously that will need to include any standards work that Simon will lead on for us. So I think at this stage, what we should do is just note the work that's facing us over the corporate year. Some of the suggestions that members have made this morning, once Andreas produced the set of minutes, might find their way into an action log, which we'll monitor committee meeting by committee meeting. But it's a bit early for that because we haven't got the minutes to read through. But so what I'm inviting people to do is just note the work of the committee going forward. Jan, is there anything you need to say in addition to that?
Yes, Chair, it's just to note on the forward work programme, as Diane's just outlined, that the audit completion report and the annual report for 24/5 will be coming to the November meeting. So we will need to make some amendments to this schedule and just add an update at the September meeting. But that was all I was going to say, really.
And if I can offer some comfort, not all audit committee meetings have as many items on the agenda as this one. So it may not always feel like that, but it does get easier. Right. So we've noted the monitoring report action log. I'm not aware of any urgent business. There is no urgent business, I'm advised. Now, the date of the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, 24th of September at 10:15. So, members, that concludes this meeting, except for if, and I understand there's been some discussion around the availability of the pink reports. What I'm proposing, and I'm looking to Mr. Gerard for advice here, that we find out what happened in terms of availability of the reports to some members. And it may just be technical issues to do with the sorts of laptops people have got. But I don't think at this stage we can have a discussion on the pink papers if some members have not had the opportunity to read them. Is that fair? Yeah. Mr. Gerard.
We will make inquiries to see what the issue is, and for the avoidance of doubt, we will forward to those members who haven't got the pink papers so they can satisfy themselves. For the purposes of today's meeting, it was merely to note anyway, so I don't think any harm is done, but clearly if issues do arise which are compelling, people can raise them at the next meeting.
Yeah. Councillor Elliott.
Could it be confirmed who didn't get the pink papers from the members in this meeting now, or?
I suggest that if members didn't get pink papers, they let Andrea know. If they just drop her an email, that's probably the easiest way rather than keep everyone waiting. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer.
On that basis, members, we've concluded the morning's business. I'd like to extend our thanks to the officers who put together the reports, because they've been extensive and well written and well presented. So, members, thank you very much for your time, and that is the conclusion of this morning's meeting.